We're going to be covering depth of field in this session. Now I know you've already had depth of field in theory, but this is going to be using depth of field in its practical application. Now for these assignments, we're going to have our camera in the A setting. So for my Nikon, that's the A setting right there. But for your Canon users, you're going to be in the AV setting. And the display is going to show an A in the upper left-hand corner right there. When you rotate the control wheel, you're going to see that the f-stop right here will change. And as that changes, the shutter speed, the corresponding shutter speed, will also change. But you choose the f-stop and the camera chooses the shutter speed. Remember, I'll be using the terms aperture and f-stop interchangeably. They mean the same thing. So for our subject, we're going to be using a gingerbread house right here that my granddaughters made. We didn't let them eat any of it because they're going to either go into a sugar coma or they're going to tear the house apart. You never really know what's going to happen with that much sugar. So we still have it. The first two images were taken with the lens zoomed to maximum magnification. On your kit lens, it's probably going to be 55 millimeter. You can see that the one on the left is taken with a high f number of f22. That gives us the most depth of field. The one on the right was taken with the lowest f number of f3.5. That yields the least amount of depth of field. In both cases, I chose the aperture and the camera chose the shutter speed because I'm in the A mode. That's aperture priority. Please note the differences in the background. The higher f number makes the background sharper. That is what is called more depth of field. The other image with the lower f number has a softer background. That means less depth of field. There are many reasons why you'd want to have more or less depth of field. We'll be exploring those choices for the whole term because it's an exciting subject. But the main goal now is to have you be able to control your depth of field. In the next set of images, I'm zooming the lens to the widest view, which is 18 millimeters for your camera. I'm also having to move closer to maintain the same image size of the gingerbread house, because when we zoom out to the widest lens setting, everything gets smaller. It has to get smaller because we're seeing more on the sides and the top and the bottom. So we must move in to make the house bigger. Many things change when I change my zoom setting. Besides just the size of the objects, the depth of field increases. Wide lens settings give us more depth of field. Long lens settings give us less depth of field. Here we see the differences in the same object with different zoom settings. The one on the left is at maximum zoom setting and the one on the right is at minimum zoom setting. Note that the minimum zoom setting, that's the wide angle setting, has the most depth of field even though they have the same f-stop. With this comparison, we see the most depth of field difference you can get with your kit lens. On the left is the widest zoom lens setting at the highest f number. That's going to be 18 millimeters at f22 for you. Lots of depth of field there. On the right is the longest zoom setting and the lowest f number. That's going to be 55 millimeters at f4 or f3.5 for you. Very little depth of field. We call this short depth of field. So what's the preferred setting? Do you want to use less depth of field or more? That depends completely on the subject matter. The general rule is that when you want to separate the subject from the background, like in a portrait or a close-up of an object, you want less depth of field. That's accomplished with a long lens and a low f number like f2.8 or 3.5 or 4. When you want a lot of depth of field, like a landscape or a group shot with many rows of people to get in focus, you'll want a lot of depth of field. You get that with a high f number, like f16 or f22. For wildlife, sports, and portraits, you'll want to use a very long lens and a fairly low aperture number for the maximum magnification and less depth of field, like this shot with a 300 millimeter lens. These images taken by wildlife photographers demonstrate how dramatic the long lens and the short depth of field combination can be. That's the standard for most wildlife and sports photographers. In this landscape shot, we're using the wide lens setting and pointing the camera down slightly to raise the horizon. Our f-stop is f16 for the maximum depth of field. Now, I know this can be confusing at first, but practicing these settings will get you to understand the mechanics of the camera and how you can control the image. In 3 or 4 shooting sessions, you'll get a pretty good handle on the results from these controls. By the end of this class, you'll be very good at this. Now, our assignment for this session is to select a subject and a busy background. You can use a person or a pine cone or anything that will remain still. Move in to fill the frame, leaving a little space around it so you can see the background. For shots 1 and 2, set your camera on the widest lens view. That'll be 18 millimeters for most of you. Take a shot at the highest f number, like f22, and the lowest f number, like f3.5. For shots 3 and 4, set your camera on the longest lens view, like 55 millimeters. Take a shot at the highest f number, like f22, and the lowest f number, like f3.5. Take care to keep the object size the same in all shots. Upload your best shots to my email address, that's lunj@yosemite.edu, and be sure to put lens DOF in the subject line.